Hey everyone, and welcome to a new episode of Return of the Living Geeks. Here we have fun geeking out about our favorite movies, TV shows, old, new, what have you. My name is Michael Vaughn, and I'm the writer for Geek Vibes Nation. And my previous bylines include Films in Review, Scream Magazine, and AMC's The Bite. I'm also the author of a book called The Ultimate Guide to Strange Cinema, and currently, I co host a podcast called The Humanoids from the Deep Dive. And with me is my fellow humanoid co host, Andre Couture. And I'll let you introduce yourself here.
I am also a writer for GVN, Geek Vibes Nation, and um, supplementing voice at Humanoids from the Deep Dive, and that's about it. So yeah, I guess we're here to talk about some Texas chainsaws.
Yeah. And so I want to just say from the outset that it is by far not the worst Texas Chainsaw film.
No,
And I wanted to like get into the stuff that I really liked about it because I try to always just like find some good things to say about something. Like I don't like just shitting all over stuff, especially about a franchise that I really love. I'm a huge fan of the original. So actually, the one thing that's kind of cool is I went to Cinema Wasteland and I got to meet the OG cast and crew of Chainsaw, which was one of the coolest convention experiences. Like to tell you how cool this was, Lloyd Kaufman just unexpectedly showed up to the Trauma booth to sign autographs for free. Like it, it was so fucking cool. Like I was like just pretty much out of high school, so I mean, this was like really awesome to meet the cast of like one of my favorite movies, like meet Lloyd Kaufman. Um, I'm only saying that because like it is a franchise that does mean a great deal to me, and I know it means a lot to a lot of people. I'm just like I said, I'm going to kick it off with some stuff that I did like, and then I'll throw it back to you, Andre. So this is a really gorgeous looking movie. Like it is really well shot. Um, like the cinematography is great. I even think the direction is really spot on. And I was doing some research, and um, David Blue Garcia is the director, and this is his only second feature film,
Mhm.
which is really impressive. He's only had one other previous feature film. And again, making a movie is tough. And even if it doesn't maybe turn out the way everybody wants it to, he did a really like nice job. I mean, it's on a technical level, I think very competent. Like, you know, we've both seen really badly directed movies where
Yeah,
you clearly know the director has no idea what they're doing. Um, this is certainly not the case. I definitely understand like what he was trying to go for. I think my biggest thing is like eh, well, and I should also point out it's a really nicely paced movie because it's only like 70-ish minutes long.
it's a little bit shorter than the original, actually.
Yeah, and the original's like what, maybe like under 90 minutes, right?
Yeah, it's somewhere within 80, mid 80s, but the
Um,
credits are like far shorter in the original than they are in this one.
yeah, so it's a nicely paced movie. I think really, and we'll get into more of this, but I think where um, we start to see some issues is like with the screenplay. So I'm gonna like throw it over to you. What did you think was some of the highlights of the movie.
Well, yeah, the visuals are actually they were pretty great. Like I looked up David Blue Garcia's film history, and he is originally a cinematographer. So
Mm.
his eye for visuals details like that translated pretty beautifully. Like there was some great shot compositions. Um, Even like the shots with just very slow, simple motions did a lot for me. It was almost like it was framed in some of the ways that a lot of comic books that I enjoy like frame their shots, and the composition of everything is really nicely I would say like very even, and um, with regard to like the landscape. So like not a lot of modern films can do that, especially not when the director has a certain command over like the visual aspect. There are some exceptions, of course. Like this guy's shooting kind of reminds me a little bit of like Wes Anderson, which some people did draw some comparisons to, and I agree to the most for the most part about that. But the visual aspects were the strongest, I think. The the next thing would be actually the performances. The performances in this were really pretty good. The only like separation that I have is the performances of the writing that ensues. Like there's some things that performances can redeem or save. Like if you have a really bad script, character actors, legacy actors, even amateur first time actors can um, put a new spin on something where the writer doesn't necessarily think this certain way about what they're writing for the characters. But I think they all bring a really good energy to it. Um, my favorite probably being Jacob Lattimore's character, Dante, the chef. Like I really wanted to see more of him, but alas, you know.
Yeah, and that's an issue that I have. There's been some really interesting theories that we'll get into, but yeah, I totally agree. I think the actors do a really nice job. And I also have to say, like the production, like when I was taking notes, I also thought the production design was really also top notch. Like it was exciting to kind of see that really grungy, grim, dirty, like every surface caked with grime. Um,
Yeah, it was like it almost felt like if someone just cleared off the countertops of say the house in the original 74 film and then didn't do anything. They just left everything on the floor, and they came back like 50 years later, and there's
yeah,
just like layers of just like um, decades of grime just sitting there.
yeah, and again, it's interesting because when I see like the reviews and just like some tweets, a lot of the praise was like, oh, the gore is so awesome, and it's awesome to see like a really awesome like gritty, grimy, gory movie. And I'm also like, yeah, I I do think the gore is pretty awesome in this. But again, I don't feel like when they were talking about what really was awesome about this movie, it's just like how I feel like we take for granted just how wonderfully it did look, and the production values and the sets and everything just kind of put you into this like really grim, depressing, bleak sort of world.
Yeah,
Which
like
yeah.
there was a so one of like the early characters that we meet is this redneck diesel truck driving uh, M4A1 uh, like gun nut guy, and there's a line where after they realize that he's their like handyman pretty much when they get into the city, the little town of Harlow. They I can't remember which character it was. It was either Melody or Lila, one of the sisters. They come to him and just passively accuse him of being a nihilist. And I think that's exactly the tone that this movie was going for. Was
Yeah.
just like pretty much not quite absolute, but nihilism for sure. And that definitely comes across.
Yeah, and I also like really thought his character was going to be so that the character's name was um Richard, um
Yeah.
and I guess the actor is Mo Dunford, which he looks very familiar, but um again, going back to the acting is really good. I feel like that's
Mhm.
getting lost in some of these discussions, but yeah, I was kind of hoping for like so okay, this is part of what I loved and part of what I didn't like about his character. Like I like that okay, so from here on out, I'm calling a spoiler warning.
Oh yeah, I think it's fair to say that we're going to spoil some shit if you haven't seen the movie.
Yeah, but I'll just give everybody like a good heads up. You know, we're going to be talking about some key plot points. So if you do want to see the movie, pause it here and come back. So yeah. So anyways, like with his character, like I thought, oh, you know, maybe he's like working with Leatherface somehow. I feel like they kind of set that maybe like I don't know. I was just trying to think of like what they could do with his character that'd be really interesting. Or again, I was thinking more conventionally, he's probably going to be like the bad boy that is like misunderstood and gonna like save the day. And it turns out that it was none of that. Like he's just an ancillary character that gets killed. And part of me is like, oh, that's really dumb. But then part of me is like, it's kind of a great way to subvert expectations.
Yeah, that one was I'm still on the fence whether or not like I enjoyed how his character was handled because he has a really surprisingly tender moment with Lila, the sister, the younger sister, because she talks to him about like her surviving a school shooting and shows him the scar that where the bullet entered her, and like he has an assault rifle just laying on a counter in his garage shop, but he actually takes the time to like listen to her story and sympathize with her, which is something that like not a lot of people would assume of those rednecks out there who, you know, fight for their Second Amendment rights and they want to have as many assault rifles as possible to protect their family or, you know, homestead or anything like that. Like nothing that you would associate on the surface level of that. And that character investment ends up not really going anywhere. And I think that might have been part of the subversion that they were going for, but it felt a little bit like we had the carpet yanked out from underneath us.
Yeah, and again, like part of me is like, oh, okay, film, you got me. Like, but the other part of me is like, you're so spot on. Like he was a really interesting character because they didn't treat him like a one-dimensional like redneck Texan.
Yeah.
You know, he kind of starts out that way, but then again, you know, as you mentioned, that scene where he talks about you know, really seems to be empathetic with her. And, you know, it is a really nice moment. And it's probably one of the maybe more sort of, I want to say optimistic moments of the movie where it's like two people from opposite ends of the spectrum kind of meeting. Um,
Yeah.
but then he gets sledgehammered in the face.
First the leg, which like that was one of the first moments where I actually exclaimed, just like I saw the leg bend the other way, and it was like that's pretty fucking brutal. And like at this point, he's already he's technically dead already.
Yeah.
So
And here's the thing. So um here's where the movie lost me, and then I'll throw it over to you to where exactly it lost you. But I could be okay with some of the plot holes. Like, I'm not somebody that nitpicks plot holes to death. Like, I can let some of those slide. Because it's,
least of
I
all in
mean,
the Texas Chainsaw movie.
right. It's
Yeah.
like Texas Chainsaw 2 is like one of my favorite movies of the franchise,
Mhm.
and it makes not a goddamn lick of sense, but I love it. Where it lost me was like the bus scene.
Yeah.
So here's okay, like if you're gonna just be like a gore fest with not a lot of substance, that's fine. I'm completely okay with that. But when you also try to have something that's like tonally weird and so obviously, you know, the pretty infamous like bus scene where the you know, everybody gets their phone and is like live streaming,
Yeah.
you know, it's like okay, like and then when he's like, dude, bro, you're going to be canceled if you do anything. I'm terribly paraphrasing, but everybody knows that line right
Mhm.
now. And
Yeah.
I'm like, I feel like my eye twitched a lot because I'm like,
Yeah. I felt that.
it's like,
I
okay, like hating influencers is like, okay, if that's kind of what you're going for, that's fine. Like TCM2 like had the whole like yuppies
Mhm.
thing. So I'm like, okay, you know, if that's where you want to go with it, I'm fine with that. Like, I'm certainly not an influencer. I'm probably the anti-influencer, but like, it's like I hate when it tries to be satirical without really adding the substance to, you know, actually inject that satire. And again, listen, if
Mhm.
you just want the movie to just be like a fun, gory, wild ride, listen, I'm there for it. You know what I mean? Like I like give me that. Like where it lost me was it was trying to be like its message was just kind of all over the place, and I thought like it was kind of unnecessary.
Yeah.
Um, like it, it's like just it's interesting because when I see like people that really are like ride or die for this film, which is fine. Like
Mhm.
full disclosure, if you love this film, like more power to you. I'm actually a little jealous that I didn't like it more, but
Yeah.
it's just for me, it wasn't fun when it was trying to have sort of like this half-baked sort of like message or like again satirical bent when it doesn't really put the time or work in to really earn that. Like you just spouting off some like buzzwords like cancel culture is not the same as making something like satirical. Again, Texas Chainsaw 2 was definitely a better way of how the series handled like a very like satirical kind of 80s excess sort of
Mhm.
bent, you know what I mean? Like this doesn't do
Yeah.
that, but
And
again
the
it's so needless. Like don't it didn't even need to have that. Like it could have just been like a fun, like cut some of that out and it could have just been like a fun gory roller coaster ride, and I'm like I would love that. But
yeah, I think that the there's a lot of angles that were probably used in this new Texas Chainsaw where David Blue Garcia went one direction, but he decided to leave some elements in. And I don't know how much of it is left over from the original director teams who were fired from the film about a couple weeks
oh,
in. I don't really know a lot about that, but I do know that there was another director or directors tied to making this. and it didn't get a theatrical release because of like the time delay, I think, of this team not working out for the project and whatever that entails. But I think the movement from the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre to the focus on satirizing yuppie culture in two is a completely natural movement because Tobe Hooper was one of those hippies from the 70s. Yeah. And it follows a group of hippie kids, even down to like when they pick up a hitchhiker, caring about their fellow man. Like even if that hitchhiker looks like he smells like he just came out of, you know, the slaughterhouse and he's going to stink up the van, or he looks weird, like he's going to asphyxiate out there. Like, you know, they worry about each other's safety, and that in turn becomes their downfall because of their, you know, their concern. And that was covered in such like a brilliantly minimalistic way. And then in the second one, Hooper kind of he was examining the Exodus almost travel aspect as like a vacation angle, where like the rich kids, you know, steal their rich dad's car and they drive into like the, you know, the sticks of Texas, and they shoot like city limit signs because no one's there. Like the cops aren't, they're not even like around because everyone knows there's like 2 or 3 cops per town every like 50 country miles, right? So they can do whatever they want because they can buy their way out of anything. And Tobe Hooper is here to say no, because the Sawyer family is always vigilant about their territory, which is even more expansive now than it was in like 74. But with the new Texas Chainsaw Massacre, it's even more downsized. It's a small town, Harlow, which they never really give you an idea of like, is the main street it? Is that all of Harlow? Is there more of that? Because when the kids are driving through, they get pulled over by the police, which there's like a dozen cops for that tiny ass town. It's not really clear how much of a jurisdiction there is, like how large of an epicenter this town of Harlow is for Leatherface to like lay claim to, because the entire movie pretty much just takes place on that one main street where it's like the house, the garage, the movie theater, and like the street where the party bus is, and that's it. Like, yeah, there's no like, I don't know. It seems a little myopic in scope in a way where the focus could have been a little bit more expansive, especially when the whole point was for these influencers, like very young entrepreneurs, are here to basically flip or gentrify, whatever, you know, term you want to use, like something old, unused, decrepit into like a new haven or like a metropolis for the height of like late stage capitalism, which is something that the kids even like, they even use that term, late stage capitalism, almost as a weaponized way, but not really realizing that they're the ones wielding that weapon. And it never quite gets there to really truly present these as like, not necessarily villains, but like nuanced characters that wield a power that they don't really realize how like damaging or even revitalizing that they are. And I think that's part of the movie's like squandered potential. Like it really could have dove into those themes, and maybe in the production of the film where they switched like directors, maybe writers, I'm not entirely sure, like some of that just got lost in translation. Uh, but it would have been far more interesting because like the Texas Chainsaw movies are best when they're about these like social dichotomies, and it just doesn't really do that. So it kind of just goes for fulfilling the title, which I think is sadly shallow.
Yeah, and yeah, no, that's a great point. Like I do really feel like, first of all, that's kind of mind-blowing about how like fraught this production seemed to be. So it almost kind of makes me, it doesn't make me like the movie more, but it kind of makes me like appreciate the fact that it wasn't more of a mess, honestly, because
Yeah.
like that's kind of wild to have all that sort of going on. So I don't know if this is true, but apparently this movie didn't test great. Um, that's probably why there seems to be a lot of um, like not a lot of character development. The thought is that there's probably like a longer maybe director's cut with
Maybe.
maybe some more character development. And I mean, because it's so weird. I mean, like even like the sort of like school shooting subplot like feels so left field. Like I get maybe where they were trying to take that, but it didn't, again, it didn't feel like it was fleshed out enough to really be like a powerful commentary on again, I maybe assume that they were trying to like talk about like the glorification of like guns and gun violence.
Mhm.
And um again, I'm not somebody that has to, so I don't always have to have a message in my movie. It's
Mhm.
nice when you do, but if you're just gonna like have a really like fun, crazy, like Hellfest is one of my favorite recent movies, just because it knows what it is. It
Mhm.
doesn't try to have a message. It's like, here is this stupid, fun, like body count movie. And that's fine. Like that's perfectly okay. But like it just starts getting frustrating when you obviously have some things you want to say, you have some ambitions, which that's fine too. But then it's almost like you want to have your cake and eat it too. Like you want to be a nonsense, gory ride, but then you also kind of want to like soft pedal some like messages or like some commentary, but it never really gets there. Like
Mhm.
it's so frustrating. Like if like just be a fun gory ride, which I will say, you know, even though I'm not somebody that necessarily thinks a gory movie makes a movie really great, I think that if, you know, the movie doesn't have a lot of stuff going on, it's always just fun to have some mindless, like gratuitous violence, you know?
Yeah. And you know I'm all for that.
Yeah.
And if so, I think where I kind of like didn't couldn't take the two very differing tones here was because um, the the first act or so of the movie is very front loaded with these issues, and like that would make sense if the rest of the film actually delved into these issues and like even if like very lightly attacked them like the way Leatherface attacks the people who like hold these convictions. Um, it never does. So it's like it's a setup. There's a bunch of setups thematic wise that never receive a payoff. But it seems to want to think that the payoff of the actual massacre of these people is um, the argument or the statement towards these themes, and it simply isn't. So um, to me, it feels like these issues were a little bit shoehorned, especially the gun violence thing. The school shooting seems like it was there from the start, where maybe it was trying to make a statement about how a lot of like modern horror is like features either characters um, or actual like real people who have been through something traumatic and arguably worse than the horror movie situation they find themselves in. But it seems to get lost a little bit. That was the strongest aspect to me, was Lila's like survivor nature, and like later on she does um, conquer some fears, but it never really felt like um, an achievement for her. It just felt like, if I don't do this, I'll die. This is like, I'm not going to reflect on this at all.
Yeah, and that's kind of where that's such a great point. And I think that that's where, you know, if there is like a longer director's cut, it would be nice if there was more like character growth for her, to actually just make that through line feel like really rewarding. Because right now, like, yeah, she does have an arc. I mean, it's not a really fleshed out one, but it's like there. I will give it that. And again, I don't like hate this movie. I get frustrated because I see like things that they were trying to go for, and it just falls on its face. And it
Yeah,
could have, like you said, it could have been really fertile ground for some really interesting conversations. But man, it just never gets there. And
yeah,
you know, again, you don't necessarily have to even work that hard. I feel like I almost kind of feel like the um the screenwriters are like putting themselves into a corner where they're, like you said, they're setting up all these really interesting ideas, and then maybe this is where the, you know, other production had a different, or like other filmmaking team had a different direction and sort of dropped that, because again it just feels like it's so like so weird tonally, and like the whole like I in theory I love the party bus scene because it's really cool looking. It is
mhm,
like this ridiculous like massacre.
yeah,
And you know it again, you know, I will give the director credit. It's well shot, it's really cool looking. Like spatially he knows how to sort of really use the environment really well. But again, it's just like it's like the one moment that like I said, lost me, just because it was like, okay, I see what you're doing, but it's so kind of on, it's like so like bluntly delivered with no like any kind of subtlety. And again, you know, you didn't even need to do that. It could just be like
yeah,
stupid kids getting killed, and I still would have been just fine with that. Like just don't
yeah,
bring me something and then not deliver on it. Like, I don't know.
yeah. And the one thing that, so a lot of people do point to the party bus massacre as like one of the more brutal aspects of the movie because it's unflinching, you know, of depiction of on screen like violence and gore. And you know, like for the most part, for me, it didn't really work in that aspect. Like I could see where like the production design, the staging, it's like it's the perfect set piece. Like you have everyone trapped in like a tin can with Leatherface, his weapon of choice, and one way out, which I'll get to something about that later. And the only practical effects that I noticed were really just like the blood squirting and like, you know, blood smears on the walls and the windows and everything. But the the variety of excess that it goes for is just completely like just showing us everything in like CGI detail, which was not, I wasn't really quite a fan of. And it kind of like detracted from the brutality for me. And I know that that's what they were going for. Like they wanted us to feel this like hopeless, um, just nothing but blind fear in that. And all I could think about is like they could just be cutting away, just like Toby Hooper was doing in his original. And like you could be a lot more creative in um, illustrating how brutal of a massacre this is if you don't focus on that. And it comes off a little snobbish, but if you're making a Texas Chainsaw Massacre movie that visually looks this interesting, especially the interior of some of these close-ups in the party bus, it almost betrays its own artistry. Like when you show something like this, as unflinching as it is, to like color everything in very like uneven digital effects that don't really look that convincing at all. And like for me, it kind of brought out a little bit of like an underhanded like comedy that maybe was used a little bit better in like Texas Chainsaw 2. But it didn't quite work for me at all. And especially when it cuts back to these kids, like there's some guy like with his arm cut off and like he's just like looking at it while it's just spurting out, and like that just felt like comedic in the way that they didn't intend.
Yeah.
And like later on, Leatherface is in the back of the bus and everyone's still on the bus. They don't see the one open door that's there, and like I don't know where they're going to go, but like certainly don't stay on the bus. But it does have like a nice little clever sequence where our main characters are locked in the bathroom and Leatherface is trying to get into the bathroom. He breaks open the door and tries to like open the lock on the other side. And one of the sisters has like this chainsaw corkscrew that they bought at the gas station earlier in the movie, and then just stabs him with like a replica, like a little cutesy piece of merchandise that resembles his actual weapon. So I thought that was kind of funny. And then they escape through the roof, and I think they run to the movie theater from there. But as the set piece that's being discussed the most with this movie, and mostly in something that everyone seemed to have wanted, I don't think I necessarily did. It didn't really capitalize on the like the dire nature of like the like boiling down the evil, killing the almost as evil if not more evil in the movie, and it didn't fulfill its point there. It just delivered on the title, and that's about it for me. So it's very surface level.
Yeah, like I feel like I totally get what you're saying. Like it almost feels like at that point you're so sort of numb to it that yeah, I will say that I think it does have some dodgy CGI, but I think it's a fun sequence. But it's like it didn't, like you said, have that kind of impact. But I will say, like, oh gosh, I can't think of her character name, and I'm probably going to be struggling to remember these characters, like outside of the real main characters. She was like the blonde where you kind of knew she was going to die.
Yeah, Ruth.
Okay, yeah.
That was Ruth. Yeah, she didn't have much of a character, which
is kind of a shame because again, I think all these actors did a really good job. Like the guy that played like the new Leatherface was pretty awesome. But I thought her death was kind of disturbing in the beginning, like when like he kills her and then like tears run down her eyes.
Yeah,
and I'm like,
that was
man.
good.
Yeah, like that. And that was like pretty early on, and I was like, okay,
that was for me. That was setting some expectations that the movie didn't really deliver, because like that was a brutal kill.
Yeah,
and like that versus any of the party bus stuff, it's like it's no contest. Like her death was to me like more visceral than anything else.
Yeah, like it packed that punch because again, we weren't that desensitized, and you know, I kind of knew she wasn't going to survive, but then part of me is like, oh, it would be like a nice, cool expectation if she actually was maybe not the final girl per se, but maybe somebody that actually like made it a little bit longer and maybe had a little bit more of an interesting character. But like, no, she was a goner. And
Yeah.
um, like, were you also kind of like shocked to see William Hope in this movie?
A little bit, yeah. So that was kind of a nice surprise.
Mhm.
But I also like I don't really think that those appearances really did much in the long run,
No,
especially, and we haven't even talked about Sally's return yet.
right.
And like talk about squandered potential. I mean, I can understand if they were making a statement with the whole like returning legacy Scream Queen thing, but they didn't really stick around to make any real points about it. It just seemed referential for the sake of being referential to me,
Yeah.
um, other than to provide the main characters one extra like moment of just quiet and like a another chance to collect themselves before going in for the next round, which um, yeah, it was a little disappointing because I do really like Olwen Foray as an actress, and I think the most recent thing she's been in that us Americans are pretty much aware of is Mandy, the Panos
Yeah.
Cosmatos
Okay.
film.
Yeah. I thought that was her. Yeah.
Yeah, she has a like a definite presence in Mandy, and it's like just ethereal and like threatening on so many different levels. And this one, it just felt like she was just putting on a cowboy hat, and that was her character.
Yeah, so like I guess we'll just get it. I guess we'll properly just get into the whole Sally thing then. Yeah, I was really disappointed because again, people were like, "Oh, they're trying to do like the Laurie Strode Halloween reboot thing." And again, listen, I was somebody that was like, I don't knee jerk hate that idea. Like
Yeah.
I think that's actually kind of cool. My one thing was, like the real actress Marilyn Burns did die in 2014. So it felt a little disrespectful. I know has been some like have like some other people have been saying about. I mean, I can see that point. I don't really necessarily feel like that's the case.
Yeah.
But like even if you can get that out of like out of like the way of like recasting someone that passed away is a little cringe, but like I think she's awesome. Like she did a fantastic job. Like it was one of the easiest things to kind of buy that she was like older Sally.
Mm-hmm.
Again, I've seen the original like 100 times. Like I actually got to meet the real Sally, and she was awesome. So I mean, I could just definitely like I was there for it. I thought it was really cool, and they just didn't do anything. Like I feel like they do it. They even kind of shot themselves in the foot because if they wanted to maybe potentially bring her back, um, it's like why would you have a really interesting character and somebody that could potentially be like somebody that could like have led a new maybe even trilogy of films,
Mm-hmm.
and then just so unceremoniously kill her off like they did her character so dirty.
Yeah, and that was the thing too about killing her off was um, they're making a big deal about her, still being out there, coming back to finish the job, or, not finish the job, but like to enact the revenge that she has been building up these feelings towards, like Leatherface, uh, which is kind of an oversimplification, where like she was terrorized far more by all the other family members than she was Leatherface alone. But that's a whole separate point. But um, her her dramatic weight as a character that could do potential damage, um, they didn't really put any uh, investment of time or stakes into her in present day for the audience to really truly feel anything when she dies, which
Yeah.
almost makes the point, which almost makes the original Texas Chainsaw movie kind of pointless in that regard, where it's like, why did she suffered for nothing? Like, what else has her life been for? Like her entire journey was just like an elongated version of her not leaving that house alive in 1974. It's like she was just living on borrowed time because she just happened to be lucky, when that Black Maria truck drives up.
Yeah.
And like it could have made that point, but I don't think it did. Like it could have been saying that, like, sometimes you just get really lucky and you get another 48 years of life, but then you just die the way that you should have.
Yeah, I mean that's a really great point, and I also think that they could have even like maybe and this was something that I thought they were setting up to do, like was to make sort of a parallel between her and Lila as survivors.
Mm-hmm. She kind of gets like a line in, but it really just feels like a Yoda-ism, where it's just like, don't run. Like you'll
Yeah,
just get more haunted if you run from the
that's
thing you're
right.
scared of. I'm like, yeah, that's good advice, but um, that's it.
Yeah. Again, I try to give like movies the benefit of the doubt, especially one that's probably made on not a this is by no means a low budget movie, but it's also really not a like a Marvel level budget movie. So, some of the things like that maybe would have irritated me, I tried to sort of just shrug off, but like it takes no extra money to like tighten up your screenplay and like really flesh out your characters. Like,
Mm-hmm.
um, it's like I don't get it. Like, like I even like the plot holes that like again sort of grated on me, but I sort of just shrugged off. Like, she keeps looking at this old Polaroid. Who was taking pictures?
Yeah, and the hitchhiker took a picture of them, but he burned it,
Right.
and we saw a glimpse of it, and it was really a bad picture. Like I'm with the kids in '74 on that one.
Yeah, it's just like again, that's nitpicky, and I will
Yeah.
admit, I mean, like even if that stuff was like still in there and it had some really good character development, um, I could easily forgive that. Again, it's a Texas Chainsaw movie. It's like it's
Mm-hmm.
not high art, but it's still a
Still art.
really, huh?
It's still art. It's not, maybe not
Yeah.
high art, but it's somewhere in the art.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, like I will say the one thing that I will it is awesome about this movie is, and again, not so this review isn't super bleak, but we are talking about Texas Chainsaw Massacre again. Like we are collectively talking about it, probably revisiting the original more.
Mm-hmm.
Like I could easily see a lot of people maybe like renting or seeing like the original for the first time that maybe never has. And that's awesome. Like so, if it takes something like this to get a resurgence, of enjoyment out of like the first film and the sequels. I mean, um, you haven't ranked the sequels yet, like recently, right? Like yet.
I actually have. I've been ranking them as I go because, like,
Okay.
uh, well before this came out, I had only seen the original two and Leatherface Texas Chainsaw 3. So from there, I went my way through the series in order of like release date, and I think I finished the series before this new one about a week or so before reviewing it. So I was able to see all of them before reviewing this one, and I was sort of ranking them as I go. I think I might have changed my position on a few of them a couple times.
Okay,
Um,
you updated it though. We can cut this out, but I definitely want to like check out your ranking sometime.
yeah, I think it's a private letterbox list because I wanted to wait until this one came out to like put it in the list somewhere.
Okay, share it to me for me later. But yeah. So my question is like, what do you think is like your favorite, like outside of the original film, obviously, like what is your favorite sequel and what is your least favorite sequel?
Let's see. I'm gonna get the least favorite out of the way, and like to me, it doesn't even really register as a Texas Chainsaw movie. And that's the 2017 Leatherface.
Mm,
Like to me, even in watching it, it felt like a movie that was written to not even have anything to do with Texas Chainsaw. Like, and then the script was it it reads as something that was co-opted to fit into the universe. And they just put in a few things here and there, like near the end and at some point in the beginning, in the middle, to give it more of a unified feel. But that one was just not for me.
yeah.
Um, and especially as a prequel to the original film, like sorely unneeded. Like you don't really need to know like who Leatherface was before the 1974 version because he's not even like the most threatening member of the family. Like to me, it's the cook who is like he has all of the power. He knows how to deal with the public, and he knows how to hide his operation pretty much. And that's I think that's what a lot of these like newer like remakes, prequels, and sequels to the original specifically don't really take into account. Um, but for me, the best, like my more favorite like iteration other than the original is more of like I guess it's a sequel and what people are now calling requels, which is not I don't like that word, but is the return of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre,
Yeah.
directed by Kim Henkel, who was the writer and producer on the first one and produced every single Texas Chainsaw after that. But he really got um, the chaos down, like in that movie. He understood the family dynamic. He understood that your your chainsaw fodder, they don't have to be smart. They don't have to have um, any sort of agenda or even like any machinations for the future. Like they're just kids who left prom early and they just took the wrong road. Like that's all you need. Like
Yeah.
you just have that simple setup, and yeah, like you have characters that you identify with, that you hate, that you realize that you know these people in real life, but that's what you want in your character list. Um, like I'm pretty sure I knew some kids in high school who uh, are like arguing that they need sex every other day so they don't get prostate cancer, you know? So, and even then, like it makes it even more entertaining to see those people who like you might even say it out loud during the movie, like this kid needs to die, and then you see him die, and then it's like actually satisfactory. Like you may root for some characters to survive, where they're saying like, no, get away from Leatherface, get out of the house. But the other one is like, no, go further into the house. Like, go Leatherface, kill that motherfucker. But it's, for me, that one is almost like the perfect re-examination of what made the first Texas Chainsaw Massacre work on so many different levels. So
Yeah.
the best and worst.
Yeah, I would. No, that's awesome. Like, I completely agree. I think that one is. I hope with all this sort of like renewed interest in the series, I hope that. I mean, it already seems like it's a movie that's kind of being reappraised. Because I mean, it was like not well liked.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it
I
was pretty
mean,
butchered too in the theatrical release, from what I remember.
yeah. I my favorite would have to be Texas Chainsaw 2. I think it's so goddamn fun.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's what I wanted this movie to be so badly, which is like over the top and gory, which this was. The new one is, but like
Mm-hmm.
but it also, again, like we were talking about, it kind of had, Hooper sly satirical edge that like really um like it helped elevate the material. Like it already is pretty entertaining on its own, but then you kind of have this, again, this sort of Reagan era sort of like temple to the excess, yuppie culture. I mean, God, it's got a hell of a good soundtrack. Like, I fucking love it. Like, it's so insane. It's like, they, I guess, Canon basically gave Hooper like free reign, pretty much, just to do whatever he wanted and like not have a lot of oversight. And that's exactly what that's what he made. I mean, we rarely ever get like a director that is allowed to just unfiltered like go his own route. I mean, like, I guess probably like George Lucas was able to do that in the Star Wars prequels, but like you rarely get like where a studio will just like hand you a blank check and just do whatever you want. I guess
Yeah.
maybe that's the way, ironically, maybe that's how it is with Netflix now, with like some of the big like directors. But like, yeah, I mean, it's awesome just to see that kind of pure unfiltered like mayhem. And like I see the sets even now, it's like jaw dropping, like just how like detailed.
No, that cavern looks like, if there was ever like a Texas Chainsaw Massacre like attraction at any, if it was
Yes.
like a Paramount, or I mean, I would kill for like a Canon Films like destination theme park. But I would love to go into that cavern, is all I'm saying.
Yeah. Well, it's so funny because like, Chop Top's even like it's like Nom Land, like
Mhm.
that's like his personal sort of.
It's literally their man cave.
Yeah. Yeah. But I mean, God, I mean, watching it now, I mean, that's like what, over 30 years later, and it's like, all practical effects, all amazing production design. Like it still like boggles my mind how like just batshit crazy it is, but then how it somehow feels very coherent and like it just launches you into this bizarre world, but it has such a consistent tone and worldview, and like it sets up its world and has its own rules that it follows. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah. No,
with.
it's very cartoony, but it wears it on its sleeve, and
Mhm.
it informs you of that right away with like the two kids, driving on the highway, interstate or whatever, and then the family is just driving alongside them, and like they bring grandpa, like they put him up on the roof, and they just like Leatherface just puts his chainsaw down, like, you know, on the roof, and then cuts the guy's head off, and
Yeah,
it's just a glorious opening set piece.
but all to Oingo Boingo, which is just
It's so perfectly 1984. It's
yeah,
just, it's everything we wanted. And to go back to Canon giving Toby Hooper carte blanche to do this, that was kind of unheard of, you know, for Golan Globus, because like Canon films were notorious for like squeezing money until it cried, you
yeah,
know, to get these movies made. Like some of them were pickups, but not all of them, because like Canon Films has a very extensive filmography. They made a lot of movies before they just like crashed and burned. And I mean, it's such a wonder that we got what we got out of Canon Films. Least of all, Texas Chainsaw 2, which I think was like their first like real um, introduction to the film world,
hmm.
if I
Yeah.
remember correctly. But I don't sometimes, so I could be wrong.
Yeah. Well, that's if that's true, that's a hell of an introduction, man. Because that's,
Mm-hmm.
um, yeah. I mean, it's interesting because I hope that with this movie, it sparks interest in maybe like people checking out the sequels, like you know, I will say that there are elements of like three that I like. Um,
Mm-hmm.
Ken Foray is awesome. There's Viggo Mortensen in it. Like that's awesome. Like
His character is fun.
yeah, like
I love the little girl
the
too.
little
And
girl.
three.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I guess I it's been so full disclosure. It's been a while since I've seen the third film, but I'm pretty sure it like kind of heavily implies that that's Leatherface's daughter.
Yeah. I mean, like she sits on his lap and he gives her a kiss, which I it's just like this is kind of sweet, you know?
um but yeah, like I that's another movie that like I just remember distinctly having a really dirty, grimy sort of like it's still focused more on the family, where it's interesting like some of the later films like you know refocus it more on Leatherface, which I mean that's understandable because you know that's like your iconic character, like I get that.
He's also by far like the most visually interesting of any of the family members, really.
Yeah,
Other than like the hitchhiker in the first one, Chop Top in the second one, or like Chop Top and Leatherface were just like literally best bros in two, but they kind of just went back to like redneck family with a Leatherface in
yeah, like
the
it's really
sequels.
interesting and like okay, so when I think of like bringing back like a legacy character, like I you know I know like you know the cook is long dead, like even in this stretched out continuity he would be like grandpa's age.
Mm-hmm.
um you know like the hitchhiker died. But like I get that they want to ignore all the sequels, but like how awesome would it have been if they like just brought back like Stretch and Chop Top?
Or like if like um, one thing that I saw somewhere online was if Leatherface, because Leatherface is old in this 2022 one, and like I appreciate that he still got it, you know, but he could have also basically brought up his own like son of Leatherface thing. You know, you could have had that where Leatherface or another like distant member of the family is essentially filling the grandpa role from the originals, where like there's just like a silent, old, creaky person just sitting in a chair and that's all they do.
Yeah,
And like, you know, maybe he gives grandpa like a chainsaw, starts it for him, puts it in his hands and is like, come on, you gotta cut through the body, you know. It's
yeah,
better this way if you kill him like this. put a bucket over and then it's like hold the final girl and just like, just mirror that from the original. That could have been very fun. That I think if there was even at least one other like family member for Leatherface to bounce off of, I think it would have been a more interesting dynamic other than like your slasher killer just lumbering towards you.
Yeah, and again, like it's one of the things that I'm trying to be like less nitpicky when it comes to like plot holes. Like, I mean, because yeah, like even though the movie just kind of writes their like it makes their own plot holes. Like again, the movie's supposed to be like 50 years later or almost 50 years, and like so Leatherface would be like 70, like pushing like into 70s.
Yeah, depending on how old he was in the first one, but like even there, the continuity detail doesn't really need to be upheld. Even like going back to like the Polaroid, which did Polaroids even exist in 74?
Oh yeah, because I think because I like the hitchhiker had like an old Polaroid.
Yeah, because the hitchhiker he had some sort of uh near instant camera, but it was it was very old looking. It even had like a flash bulb and shit.
Oh
So
yeah, I get what you're saying. So it wasn't like it was like a form of Polaroid, but it wasn't like what we know as a Polaroid, like what she
yeah,
had. Yeah.
yeah, and that's so extremely nitpicky. So it's I think they could have gone a little bit more extreme in terms of like misremembering the first film, which could have been a point in itself.
Yeah.
I think that would have really done it a lot of favors. Like there'd be some things I would overlook if it just made a point to actively ignore like specific details of. Maybe by saying this was all in Sally Hardesty's perspective, so she misremembered a lot of the traumatic events. That
Yeah.
would have been really interesting.
Yeah. And again, like I'm somebody that is like, I mean, I know you're the same way too, where like we're like really fair like critics. Like I know that there's a lot of like bad faith criticism that's like sucky that, yeah, okay, you can nitpick something to death, which I'm not a big fan of. I know you're not either, but like I mean, some of it's just like small gaps in logic, and then some of it's like, oh man, it's hard to overlook, but again, like I try to be really fair and
Mm-hmm.
like look over stuff like that. But I feel like it would have been like I don't mean to bring it back to like the cinema snob, but like I think that his saying like how he initially thought that the footage that they were showing us was like the in-universe movie Texas Chainsaw, it was just like a based on real events of the actual events, which would have fixed a lot of stuff. Like you wouldn't have like why Leatherface ended up in an orphanage after the events of the first film, like what
Yeah,
happened to the Sawyer family like afterwards, well, or what was left of them.
yeah, and like, oh, nice reference there, by the way. Uh, yeah, like, I think that if they leaned a little bit more into that true crime thing rather than just
Mm,
literally pulling away from it, like it could have been that like this whole family thing was like a fabrication just to make it more of like uh, a more digestible true crime story, because like there's a lot of true crime stories that get some really important details wrong or just like fabricate them like from the ground up. And that's also something that they could have done creatively to not even just um, like make things feel that much more unpredictable or unsafe for this movie, where like we don't even know who the real Leatherface is. You
yeah.
could have like completely reinvented his character, but also just to um, save a little face with the inconsistencies of character and of like even just like internal determination and like the real drive that pushes Leatherface to do what he does. And I think they probably needed to spend a little bit more time on it.
Yeah, and I also think like so in the beginning they did sort of seem like they were setting up something kind of interesting where like this town was such a tourist destination because of this with the
Mm-hmm.
merchandise and like the little chainsaw like novelty stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, again, you could have easily folded that into okay, like like the perfect example is like okay, that the town that dreaded sundown, right, was
Mm-hmm.
like based on like a real like killer in Texas, and that town sort of like profited off of that, but they did like a sort of like that like sequel or like the soft reboot where like the first movie was a movie but then
Mm-hmm.
like there's a copycat or whatever, like something like that would have been like I think really cool. And again it feels like a small little writing tweak could have like fixed a lot of these little like nitpicks.
Yeah.
Because again what you're seeing is a movie, like it's a fictional account of like what happened in this town. I mean they could have even like said something like oh like because they never do say where it takes place, just in Texas obviously, but like
Yeah.
they never say like where in Texas, so it was like they could just be like oh yeah they never like we decided we would sue them if they said where this happened, or
Mm-hmm.
like
Really, people would just not go. Like, if we said it happened in Newt, Texas, no one would go to Newt, Texas, and then like the economy there would just completely tank, and people couldn't live there anymore. But yeah, or maybe even then, if they said where it was, like there's a bunch of like tourists that go there specifically to look for the site where these all these people were killed and used for food. Um, Maybe look for like the abandoned car lot or
yeah.
just really skewed weird attractions.
Well, yeah, and so okay, and see now I'm like okay, I feel like you and I should like rewrite this, because now I'm thinking like how cool, like okay, so if you want to like they could have even like used this to sort of like fold in like true crime with like influencers, like with like maybe you have a group of people that are like tourists that are taking selfies of like murder sites and
Selfies in the kill room.
yeah.
Yeah.
Like because again there's a way that you can still sort of do that kind of stuff but make it a little more interesting, a little more like because honestly like I like this setup is really, I think the setup in this movie works way too hard, like it works harder than it has to.
Yeah.
Um, oh, also, what was kind of weird, which I thought was going to be like a setup, and I don't know if you maybe thought this, but I feel like it's at the beginning with like I think Lila's the one that's like, oh, I have a relative that's from here.
Oh yeah. Yeah, that kind of didn't go anywhere at all, did it?
Right. So I was like, oh, okay. So they're setting up where like she's related to like Sally. Um,
Yeah, or someone there, and like she even knew like was that like the town slogan or
the
whatever that
yeah,
she
like
says?
the weird like
I don't even remember what it was.
what it was. Yeah. Oh, so without looking, there is one legacy cast member that returns from the original that's in this. Do you know who it is?
Shit. I don't know. I
John
can't think.
John Larroquette
Oh well,
is the
yeah, yeah.
narrator.
I'm thinking visually, but yeah, yeah.
Yeah, sorry. I was gonna say you don't ever see them on screen, and then I was like, oh, that would probably give it away.
Yeah.
But
Like he's come back to do those voiceovers
yeah,
a lot of times though. Like,
I know he did. Yeah, you're right. Like I'm looking it up right now. Like I know he did for the remake. Also, the remake was shot by Daniel Pearl, the same DP as the original.
Oh yeah.
And I didn't look that up. I know that because I am kind of obsessed with how amazing the original Texas Chainsaw looks. Like,
Yeah.
um, but yeah, like yeah, it's frustrating because I feel like there was a lot of like seeds of really interesting ideas that they never really went anywhere with. And I guess maybe it's just because you had like different screenwriters, different directors, you end up with a movie that felt very mishmashy. And,
Yeah.
again, to just say this again, if you are out there and enjoy the movie, more power to you. Like I will say that it's by far not the worst Texas Chainsaw. And I was like, even though there was some stuff that like didn't work for me, I was never bored.
True. Yeah. This never really bored me, but I did feel um, absent in some parts.
Yeah, that's
Just
fair.
like, where some other people would say that they were fully engaged. It was a little bit more of a passive experience for me. I will say that the near final act in the movie theater, a lot of that really did work for me when it was boiled down to the two sisters and Leatherface and the strangely existent like swimming pool that exists in the theater floor. I don't exactly know what that was about, but it went for it, and I was all right with it. I liked it. The momentum was like picking up speed there for me, and it really did like do what it set out to do. At least up until that point. I'm not a fan of how a movie ended at all. Um, but I mean, like, if they wanted to mirror in some way the ending of first, it kind of did that, but it's it's a little tricky for me to to really think of that as a devastating ending because it just felt more of like an unintended comedic sequence.
Yeah.
Like, whose autopilot goes like 5 miles an hour on a country road?
Yeah, and again, it's like I can see where they're like, oh, we're going to be really clever and we're going to recreate the ending of the first film, but like new and modern and like
Mhm.
for the new, age. And
Yeah.
it's
And
like,
it would have been funny if they did that, but like they're pretty much driving a Tesla. Like, there's no getting what around it. Like, I
yeah.
know they tried to dress it up differently, but we all know what that is. It would have been even funnier if there was someone who was late to this unveiling and they're driving their own Tesla on autopilot. And it like these Teslas are
Oh,
famous for killing and running into people and killing people. So like if Leatherface is there and he's stalking the car to grab the other sister out of the window and he just gets completely run over by someone else that he didn't even know was going to be there.
yeah.
um we're like, it could show that like he's still alive. He's gonna keep murdering people, but he gets hit by a car and like maybe he takes his immediate revenge against that person by maybe cutting their head off and they both look out the window and they scream. Like, maybe that could have been Lila's um, other resident from Harlow that just for some reason has a Tesla. I don't know.
Yeah. No, I could definitely see that being like a better ending. Like yeah, I don't know. I mean, again, I feel like at least people are talking about um like a series that has a lot of highs, definitely has a lot of lows, but goddamn, the original is staggering. Of
Yeah.
like, it's one of the movies that I'm so passionate about the first one because it made such a crater like impact on me as not even just as a horror fan, but just as like a fan of like cinema.
Mhm.
Because I mean, really, it is one of the few movies that is just like it, it's so unbearingly oppressive and hot and sticky and gross, but gross in a way that it's more of like subjective rather than just like literally having like so many kills that you're so numb, you know.
Mhm.
I mean, it still has like things that like I feel is very much still creepy and like gets under my skin. And it's like it's hard to say that about like the only like other movie that I feel like really had that sort of palpable impact was like Henry Portrait of a Serial Killer.
Yeah, I see that.
um yeah, where it like you really thought that there was like you were witnessing like real psychopaths, and it felt so dangerous because they could take you literally anywhere.
Mhm.
But you know that gets diluted over a while, and I think a lot of what's interesting is I think a lot of people forget that Toby Hooper kind of envisioned even the first Texas Chainsaw as kind of a dark comedy.
Yeah.
And it is very, I mean, it is disturbing, obviously, but like it does have this sort of um, very dark levity about it that is really palpable. Like, especially when you get sort of towards the end with like the Sawyer family and the cook, and um, you know, obviously that's taken to the extreme in the sequel, but like I kind of wish that they would have maybe peppered in some of that dark humor more into this film.
Yeah, I think what made it as darkly comedic in the first was the family dynamic where it kind of entered like a dark Three Stooges territory
Hmm.
with like the cook is, you know, God, is it Larry? No, it's
Yeah, I'm so awful at this. Like, wait, Mo's the leader, right?
yeah, yeah. So I
Like the
guess the cook
really
would be
aggressive
Mo.
one.
Like
Yeah.
he's the he's the guy who plans things, who sets he's like the breadwinner of the other two brothers. Um, where like he's bossing everyone around, hitchhikers like always doing some crazy shit. I was like, what like why the fuck did you talk to these kids? Like, what's wrong with you? You took a picture of them? Like, I'm gonna hit you with this broom handle. And then like he tells like Leatherface, stop playing with your food, you know. And I think it all like it comes to a head with the you know when Marilyn Burns' character like wakes up at the dinner table and they're all just howling. That's the most wholesome they've been as a family, and like that's you know
Yeah.
it's their goals and they achieve them. So and then the second one is a little bit more goes for the cheesiness and achieves it. You know, they take their family um, operation to the next level. They enter like the chili cook-off tournaments, and I think that's just like the next. It's a natural progression
Yeah,
of
because I
that
mean
comedy.
they really do sort of like fold into this sort of like capitalistic Reagan era of like,
I was like, yeah, we can make some money off of this.
yeah,
There's a lot
like
of meat that we're just throwing away here.
no, and I mean again, that's where like something like the sequel to the first sequel to Texas Chainsaw so brilliant because it does walk that really fine line of like horrific, but also I mean it does have something to say under how zany it is. I mean there really is a message there. I mean it does definitely have like a lot of things to say about like you know Reagan's 80s. But like I don't know, like I honestly feel like I am gonna have a hard time even remembering this new film, like maybe
Yeah,
sans like a few scenes. because it's just, oh gosh, I mean, it sucks because I wanted this movie to be good, because I think the whole mystique and the sort of like underpinnings of like the Sawyer family is really like interesting. Like at the heart of it, there is really some like demented like family values that I think is kind of interesting, that this movie never really, I mean, because this movie, it's just Leatherface, it's none of the other family members. It's like, we don't ever get to see that like sort of like demented family unit, which is also where this movie just didn't feel very much like a Texas Chainsaw Massacre film.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, listen, I'm glad some people are digging it. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I'm glad that like there's people that are more interested in checking out some of the other sequels and the original, of course. Yeah, I mean, listen, like give it another like 5-10 years, still just like reboot it and maybe do something better with it.
Well, so here's the thing. There's a like a really really short like post credit sequence. I don't know if you saw that, but
No, I
where
checked out by then.
okay, um, it's really not much. It's like once the credits are over, it just cuts to Texas countryside, and then you just see Leatherface walking out of frame, and then it shows like the house, like the Sawyer house. It's there, and he
Oh,
walks towards it. So maybe someone's in there. I don't know. But that being said, whoever, like, if they decide to make a sequel, where it's like now he lives in the house, I'm gonna watch it. Like, I mean, I'm gonna watch every Texas Chainsaw movie
yeah.
anyway, but it makes me a little bit more excited for what might come next. And they could do anything really from here. I think since they felt like they had to bring Sally back and then did what they did with her, I think at this point they now feel that they can do whatever they want, which they could have done whatever they wanted already, but
Yeah.
nevertheless,
Got back.
yeah, let's bring everyone back. Let's bring back Matthew McConaughey.
Oh my
He's hanging
gosh,
out.
yes, like a shared universe where they all just come together.
It's a full house, baby.
Yes. No, wait, turn it into a sitcom.
Yeah, and like maybe Renee Zellweger's the den mother.
Yes. Oh, I feel like it's worth pointing out that there's this rumor that like Renee Zellweger totally hates Texas Chainsaw,
Mhm.
and that's actually not true. There's
No, she
actually,
said she had fun.
yeah, and she even like there's a movie where she plays an actress, and the one movie that she's showing of her like early movies is
Mhm.
Texas Chainsaw.
Yeah,
So she obviously is not like, it's not like I hate this, and
no. I
yeah.
mean, like it was probably a smart career decision for her not to focus a lot on it at a certain point. But
Yeah.
now that everyone knows who she is. She's a very accomplished actress, and she has a new series coming out pretty soon. Um,
Yeah. I mean,
like
like,
totally reflect on it.
right. Like, I'm sure, like, it doesn't hurt that she, like, literally has an Oscar, I'm pretty sure. What? Two Oscars? I just looked that up.
Oh shit!
That's
No,
wild. I mean, that's no shade. That's no shade towards Renee Zellweger.
I
I didn't
didn't hear
realize that
about
she
that
had,
second one.
yeah. All right. And like, does Matthew McConaughey have a Oscar? Was there two Oscar winners in that movie?
Uh,
I'm looking it up because now I need to know. I did look that up, and Matthew McConaughey did win an Oscar. So that movie has two Oscar winners in it. So,
mhm.
is there any other Texas Chainsaw Massacre movie that has two Oscar winners in it? I don't think so.
I don't think so.
Um, well, like, yeah, I'm trying to think, like, who else would have been,
Yeah, until Jessica Biel and Eric Balfour get at least one each. Like, I don't know.
Yeah, then that who knows?
Maybe Marcus Nispel for best director.
um, yeah, I will say that I still think the remake is actually really good. It's interesting seeing like people's rankings, and it's kind of nice to see that at least part two and the remake is pretty high up there. Like, have you like? Oh, yeah. Well, you said you cycled through all of them. What did you think about the remake?
I did not like it. I didn't care for it.
Okay.
Um, for me, it's like, so the pacing of the 2003 remake was very slow, and it was also probably just as slow in this new Texas Chainsaw movie. So, if anything, the I don't know how dependent on whether or not you enjoyed the 2003 remake uh, as an indicator for this new one. But like, now that I know that you love the 2003 remake and hated this one, I don't know if that's really that much of an indicator.
Yeah.
So I just do know that it matches the pacing pretty closely, where like things are still feel like they're getting set up to have some sort of payoff about 45, 50 minutes in for largely a 90-minute movie. Because I think the
Yeah.
remake's about 90 minutes or so.
Yeah, it's been a while since I revisited it, but I do remember thinking it was had some really interesting things. It didn't really reinvent the wheel, but I think it kind of captured that sort of like hot, gross, claustrophobic,
Mm-hmm.
sort of dirty, nasty vibe. And
Yeah, it did.
yeah, and you know, it would be interesting to rewatch that, especially with this new one pretty much fresh in my mind for now.
Mhm.
But
Yeah, but I think we can both agree that of the remake and like the prequel for the original, um, I guess maybe it's just like a prequel to the 2003 remake, really. But Arlie Ermey's character is so good. Like, his
oh
performance is
yeah,
like the most terrifying part of them, and I think that was really really well done. That was by far my highlight of the 2003 Marcus Nispel remake. Um, I actually enjoyed the 2006 prequel quite a bit more than the remake.
yeah. So I think it's going to be really interesting. I think I want to try to maybe like um I own like the first two. I don't own three, but I own four, and then I don't own any of like the newer ones. So I feel like I need to maybe. It'd be kind of awesome if they could do a box set, but I guess it's so many different companies and stuff that
Yeah,
that's probably not going to happen. But
I mean, unless Shout Factory can do one of those big box sets like they did
oh, that would be
Friday the
awesome.
13th. Maybe they can pull that off as like a limited series or something.
Yeah, I mean, that would be. I know it. That would probably do gangbusters. I mean, that and like a Nightmare on Elm Street box set would be like rad as hell. But yeah. So I guess just is there any like final thoughts? Like I'll let you you know, if you had any other kind of things you wanted to say about this new one.
Yeah, I for me, I think that Texas Chainsaw Massacre does best when it uh, when it has group units as the focus, like a group unit of family as your antagonists, and a group unit of um, like innocents, or people who have no idea what they're in for as your protagonists. And it never hurts to actually throw in cannibalism as a theme, which is something that I thought was missing from this new one.
Yeah.
And to be frank, it was right there. Dante is a chef, and he was going to open a restaurant, and Leatherface is there, and like they did nothing with it. And that's mainly where a lot of disappointment in that I had of this new movie, like, rests, where I love cannibal movies. Like, I might even start like eating people now, but no, I might even start going through some movies that were clearly influenced by, you know, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre series, maybe even movies that were made to capitalize on that, like, you know, family, like cannibal family, just killing people for food subgenre. You know, like you have your Wrong Turns, you have your I'm going to go a little obscure. I guess would be... Yeah. And there's like a mid 80s, maybe late 80s, like shot on video movie that I watch pretty regularly called Lunch Meat, that has a lot of that.
Oh, that nice. I've heard of that one. A friend of mine has a VHS magazine that he named after that, called Lunch Meat magazine.
Yeah. I'm a big fan of Lunch Meat.
VHS nice.
Yeah. And yeah, like there's like the influence of Texas Chainsaw reaches so many different corners of horror, and everyone gets something different out of it. I think that's why the series is so like uneven as it is. Not even just counting producers and, you know, movie executives that see this as like a cash cow for one thing versus another. And like the creatives, like the directors and writers that have done what they did with certain sequels, requels, prequels, remakes, and honestly, sequels. And I will always take the time to watch every single one. Like, even if I don't like it, you know, there's no way to know unless you see the movie. And I just hope that they make more.
Yeah, no, I'm like totally there with you. Like I mean, it is what it is. I mean, and that's very simplistic, but it was not good, borderline bad, but like,
yeah,
I'm trying to be nice because I don't like to shit all over stuff that people like. Some people like.
For me, the best way to put it is because each sequel iteration of, you know, movies that carry the Texas Chainsaw name, it wasn't for me.
Yeah, and that's fine. And like I said, it's also fine if it is for you. Like, like, again, more power to you. Like,
yeah,
more power tool to you even.
Sure.
Wah, wah. But no, like, it's, again, there is things that I thought were good about it. It's just, as a whole, it just did not really connect with me. But you know, it is what it is. So yeah, thank you so much for coming out and talking about this movie. And I had a blast. I'm like looking over here and I'm like, I feel like we've been talking for like almost 2 hours.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm always happy to talk about any Texas Chainsaw movie, whether or not it's one that I loathe or one of my favorites in the franchise. So and it's better to talk these feelings out than
to let them bottled up, right?
Yeah. If there's anything that we've learned, it's that.
Yeah, well, I mean, definitely nobody's bottling their reactions on this movie. It's
no, the floodgates have opened since Friday. That's for sure.
Like, it's so funny though. Like, if as a final thought, it's like, and somebody else tweeted this out, so I can't take credit, but like, someone was like, you know, Halloween Kills, I'm the most divisive horror movie, and like, this Texas Chainsaw Massacre is like, hold my beer.
Yeah, like, I'm sure there's other more divisive movies, but it feels weird to be this critical of like, largely it's not as like culturally important as
Right.
any of the other ones.
Right. And like, again, I will say, to end this on like a positive, like I do, like I said, I do kind of love how this is, renewing a spark in like the franchise and like more importantly the original. Because I mean, Toby Hooper did make something that like has stood the test of time.
Oh
Like
yeah,
people, I mean, it's kind of a miracle that it even got made. Like the production from all accounts was like hell on earth.
yeah,
Like sometimes like figuratively and sometimes quite literally. But I mean, I mean, it's like almost 50 years old and we're still talking about it and people still get excited about it. Or, you still like see how different newer generations are coming to this film. So yeah, I mean, maybe it's not good, but I think that it's kind of cool that we're having this conversation and more people are probably going to be checking out the original than they probably would have otherwise. So
yeah. And that was a goal of Fede Alvarez and David Blue Garcia. Was like, if this movie makes them want to revisit it, if they're already familiar with it, or bring a newcomer to it, my job is done. Paraphrasing them, of course, but like that their job is done. And like with me, I did actually pretty much immediately rewatch the original,
nice.
but not in the way that they thought I would want to rewatch it.
More
So
like a
I
palate
guess,
cleanser.
yeah, it was more of that for me. We're just like, let me just
Yeah.
go back to this.
And and people that are like vehemently upset about it, like the thing is it's fine. We have that original movie. Like we will always have that movie.
Yeah, nothing has been ruined.
Right. I mean, you can just like simply ignore it if you don't like it. And people that do like it, it's fine also. Like I don't like bullying either way. Like if like don't pick on people that like it and don't pick on people that don't like it. Just don't be a dick.
Yeah,
Or Leatherface will get you. That's the real message of the movie, really, if you think about it. Just don't be a dick. Um,
yeah,
so yeah, I hope you all enjoyed this long conversation and hung in there with us. And if you did like this video, consider giving it a like, subscribe, and because we are definitely going to be doing some more movies, maybe possibly another chainsaw movie.
yeah.
Maybe. So you won't want to miss that. So thanks for hanging out with us. Bye.